I didn't notice when it began. The storm, I mean. Not outside, but inside. There wasn't any lightning or thunder to warn me. Just a constant buzz under my skin, like a current I couldn't turn off. I would lie in bed, eyes wide open, mind racing, thoughts overlapping so fast that I couldn't catch a single one. Did I say the wrong thing at work? It never stopped. And yet, if you saw me from the outside, you'd think I was perfectly fine, smiling, working, laughing at the right moments. But inside, it was chaos. A chaos I couldn't explain to anyone. Not my family, not my friends, and definitely not myself. Sometimes I would stare at the ceiling fan spinning above me and think, this is exactly how my mind feels. Always spinning, never resting. There were days when the weight of it all pressed so heavily on my chest that even breathing felt like effort. I wasn't sad, exactly. I wasn't even angry. I was just overwhelmed by everything, by nothing. The smallest things would trigger me. A delayed message, a missed call, a bad memory flashing back at an inconvenient moment. I became a prisoner of my own thoughts, locked inside a noisy cell made of worry and overthinking. I remember one particular morning vividly. I woke up before the sun. My chest felt tight. There wasn't any reason for it. Nothing bad had happened the day before. But still, my heart beat faster than it should, and my thoughts started sprinting without direction. I sat on the edge of my bed, held my head in my hands, and whispered, "Why can't I just stop thinking?" I didn't want to run away from life. I just wanted a moment of silence in my own mind. A single breath, untouched by fear or judgment. Was that too much to ask? I tried things, of course. Breathing exercises, journaling, even scrolling through calming videos that promised inner peace in 5 minutes. Nothing really worked. Or, if it did, the stillness lasted only for seconds, like watching a pond become calm after throwing a stone, only for another wave to come crashing through. There was a particular night when everything almost fell apart. I was driving home late. The streets were empty. Just me and the blurry lights. I turned off the radio, hoping the silence would soothe me. But it didn't. Instead, the silence screamed louder than the noise ever did. With worst-case scenarios, I gripped the steering wheel tightly and thought, what's wrong with me? Why can't I just be normal? That night, after reaching home, I sat on the cold floor of my room. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, staring at the wall, tired of fighting my own mind. And in that exhaustion, a strange thing happened. For the briefest moment, I stopped resisting. I stopped trying to fix it. I just watched, not with judgment, not with panic. Just watched my thoughts move like clouds passing in a vast sky. It was subtle, almost unnoticeable. But there was a stillness in that moment, quiet that I had never felt before. It didn't last long, maybe a few seconds, but it was real. And in that silence, something whispered, not with words, but with presence. You are not your thoughts. It unsettled me. I had never separated myself from my thoughts before. I believed every story they told me, every fear, every insecurity. But what if I wasn't them? What if I was the one watching them, silently, from somewhere deeper? That idea stuck with me. It became a seed that slowly started to grow. The next day, instead of jumping out of bed and diving straight into my phone and the world's noise, I just sat for 2 minutes, eyes closed, not meditating, not breathing in any special way, just sitting, just observing. And I realized something strange. The chaos was still there, but I didn't have to become it. I could watch it, like traffic from the side of the road, instead of being stuck in it. Of course, I was still lost most of the time. The storm didn't disappear overnight. But now I had moments of clarity, little gaps, little pauses. And those moments became precious to me. I started seeking stories not of success, but of peace. I wanted to know how others had quieted their storms. That's when I stumbled upon an old book of Buddhist teachings. Sitting quietly in a dusty corner of a second-hand shop, there was a quote inside that struck me like lightning. More than anything modern psychology or self-help gurus had ever said, it read, "The mind is restless, like a monkey, always jumping from one branch to another. But when you stop chasing the monkey, you realize it has nowhere to go." I read it again and again. Something about it felt true, not just in my mind, but in my bones. I had been chasing the monkey, trying to catch it, calm it, cage it. But what if the answer was not in control, but in surrender? And so, my journey truly began not to silence the storm, but to understand it, to befriend it, to sit beside it and say, "You can stay, but I won't let you carry me away." That was the beginning of something I couldn't yet name, but I knew it was sacred. Not in a religious way, but in a human way. A way that says, you are not broken. You are simply overwhelmed, and there is another way to live. I didn't know it yet, but I was on the path toward the stillness I had always longed for. A few weeks after that strange moment of stillness, I found myself standing at the edge of a small village nestled near the hills, far from the life I usually knew. I hadn't planned to be there. In truth, I just needed to get away from the city, from noise, from expectations, from myself. I had taken a few days off and traveled without much of a destination in mind. Maybe I hoped the road would give me some answers, or at least quiet the questions. I remember the air being different there, cooler, cleaner, softer somehow. Even the trees looked more at ease than I had ever felt. There was something in the way the wind moved through the leaves. Didn't rush. It whispered. The villagers spoke little, but smiled often. One of them, a quiet, elderly man with wrinkled eyes and skin like folded parchment, told me about a monk who lived at the top of a nearby hill. He doesn't speak much, the man said, but when he does, it goes straight to the heart. I don't know what made me go. Maybe curiosity, maybe desperation, maybe something deeper. I started the climb early next morning. The path was narrow, and birdsong filled the air like nature's own meditation music. With every step upward, something in me felt lighter, as if the weight of my usual thoughts had been left behind at the base of the hill. The monastery wasn't grand. It was humble. A simple wooden structure with faded paint and stone steps worn smooth by time. It was surrounded by bamboo trees, swaying gently as if they, too, were in constant prayer. And there he was, sitting cross-legged beneath a Bodhi tree that curled protectively above him. His robes were the color of aged saffron. His eyes were closed, but his presence felt deeply awake. There was no phone in his hand, no laptop, no task being done, just being. Something about him unnerved me at first. He was so still, too still, like a stone at the bottom of a clear river. I didn't want to disturb him, so I stood quietly, unsure of what to do. Just as I was about to turn and leave, his eyes opened. Slowly, gently. They didn't widen in surprise or judgment. They simply met mine and remained there, soft, unmoving. He nodded, almost imperceptibly, inviting me to come closer. I stepped forward hesitantly and sat a few feet away from him. Silence stretched between us, but it didn't feel empty. It felt full, like it was saying more than words ever could. After what felt like hours, but might have been minutes, he finally spoke. "You've brought a storm with you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, but clear as a bell. I looked at him, stunned. "How did you know?" He smiled, eyes crinkling like paper, folding into a crane. "It's written on your breath. You breathe like someone who is always running." That hit me harder than any advice I'd read online. I didn't know what to say. For a while, I just looked at the dirt beneath my feet. "I want peace," I finally said. "But my mind won't let me rest. I try, I fail. It just keeps spinning, and I don't know how to stop." The monk nodded slowly, as if my words were leaves he had seen fall from many trees before. Most people think peace is something they need to create. But peace is not created. It is uncovered. I frowned, uncovered. He picked up a small bowl beside him, filled with cloudy water, and gently stirred it. "This is your mind," he said. "Thoughts, worries, fears, all of it stirred together." Then he stopped stirring. "Now watch." We both sat quietly as the sediment in the water began to settle. Minute by minute, the water grew clearer. "This is what happens," he continued, "when you stop fighting the storm. You let it settle. You become the watcher, not the stirrer." I was quiet, watching the bowl. Something about the simplicity of it broke something open in me. I didn't need a 5-step plan. I needed to stop stirring. But how do I stop? I asked, almost in a whisper. By sitting, by breathing, by not chasing the monkey. The monkey. He chuckled softly. Your thoughts, your emotions, your need to control. That is the monkey, always jumping. If you chase it, you will be exhausted. If you watch it, it gets bored and settles. There was something both ridiculous and profoundly wise about it. He reached into his robe and handed me a small, folded cloth. Inside was a tiny piece of paper. It read, "Sit, watch, do not react. This is where freedom begins." I stayed there for hours that day. He spoke little after that. Mostly, we just sat, side by side, breathing, sometimes with eyes open, sometimes closed. I noticed how often my mind tried to run, pulling me toward problems I couldn't solve, conversations I hadn't had. But each time, I gently brought it back to the moment, back to the sound of wind or the feeling of breath moving through my nose. I didn't find enlightenment, but I found space, a small, sacred space inside me that had always been there, but was buried under years of noise. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was fighting my mind. I was simply watching it. And that watching somehow was healing. When I left the monastery that evening, the monk walked me partway down the hill. Before we parted, he placed his hand gently on my shoulder and said, "Don't try to fix the mind. It's not a machine. It's a river. Sit by it. Watch it flow. That is enough." That night, I didn't check my phone. I didn't scroll through anything. I just sat in the small guest room of the village inn, closed my eyes, and listened to my breath. In, out, in, out. For the first time in a long time, I slept without racing thoughts. And in my dreams, I saw the monk again sitting beneath a Bodhi tree, smiling quietly. The wind dancing through the leaves like a lullaby of stillness. After my time with the monk, I carried that peaceful feeling with me, like a fragile flame in the dark. But the storm inside wasn't gone. It was still there, sometimes louder, sometimes quieter, but never fully vanished. I realized that this wasn't something I could just switch off. It was a part of me, tangled deep within the roots of my mind. One evening, as the sun was dipping low, casting long shadows over the hills, I sat alone by a riverbank, lost in thought. The water flowed endlessly, never stopping, never holding on to anything. Leaves drifted on the surface, carried away without resistance. It was a simple scene, but that night it spoke to me in a language I hadn't understood before. I thought back to the teachings the monk had shared about watching the mind and not stirring the water. But how do you do that when every worry feels like a stone thrown into your pond, sending waves crashing in all directions? That's when I remembered a story from the Buddha himself, something I had read in that old book from the second-hand shop. It was about letting go. The story described a man who carried a heavy bag filled with his worries, regrets, and attachments everywhere he went. He never set it down, thinking it was part of who he was. One day, the bag grew so heavy that he could barely walk. Exhausted, he finally sat down by a river and, for the first time, opened the bag. To his surprise, it was empty. The weight had been an illusion, a burden he carried simply because he was afraid to let go. It struck me how often I carried invisible burdens, the fear of losing control, the need to be perfect, the endless replay of past mistakes. Was like that man, gripping tight to worries that weren't truly real, but felt very real in my body and soul. The Buddha's teaching on letting go wasn't about giving up or escaping from life's problems. It was about understanding that clinging to thoughts and feelings only made suffering heavier. The more I resisted my anxiety and overthinking, the more they grew. I realized I had been fighting the storm instead of sitting with it. I had been trying to control the uncontrollable. The teaching said, attachment leads to suffering, release, and find freedom. But what did release really mean? It wasn't easy. My mind argued with me every time I tried to let go. You must hold on to these thoughts. They keep you safe. If you don't worry, who will take care of the future? That's when I learned the difference between holding something gently and holding it tightly. The mind can hold feelings and thoughts without letting them rule the heart. Like holding a flower in your hand, you don't crush it, but you don't clutch it so hard that it withers. I began practicing this slowly over days, weeks, months. When anxious thoughts came, instead of fighting or chasing them away, I acknowledged their presence, nodded gently, and told myself, "You don't have to stay." Like guests at a door who can come and go. This wasn't instant peace. Sometimes the storm raged again, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I was learning to be patient with myself, to sit with discomfort instead of running. The monk had also told me about a beautiful phrase from the Buddha: "Let go or be dragged." It haunted me at first. The idea that holding on too tightly would only pull me deeper into suffering. So, I started to notice the small moments when I was clutching to hard gripping my phone obsessively, replaying conversations, fearing failure, and gently loosened my grip in meditation. I imagined placing each worry on a leaf, then watching the leaf float down a river. Some leaves would drift away fast, others would linger, but none stayed forever. One day, I realized something profound. Letting go wasn't about becoming empty or numb. It was about creating space to breathe, to feel, to be human without judgment. I started to see my thoughts as clouds, sometimes dark and stormy, sometimes light and fluffy, but always passing. I was the sky, vast and unchanged beneath them. This shift transformed how I viewed myself and my mind. Instead of a battlefield, it became a garden, a place where storms came and went, but the earth beneath remained steady. That's when I truly understood what the Buddha meant by freedom. Freedom wasn't escaping the storm. It was walking through it without losing yourself. I think that's the secret many of us miss. We want peace, but we want it without pain. We want stillness, but not discomfort. We want happiness, but without letting go of fear. But peace lives beyond that resistance. The teaching on letting go invited me to stop wrestling with myself and start listening, to recognize that suffering comes from grasping and healing begins with release. It was a slow process. There were days when I felt like a leaf caught in a violent current, helpless and terrified. But there were also days when the water was calm and I could float freely, carried gently by life itself. Letting go taught me courage, the courage to face the chaos inside without flinching, to say yes to what is, even when it's hard. The storm hadn't disappeared, but my relationship with it had changed. It no longer controlled me. I was learning to live like the river, flowing, changing, embracing every moment without clinging. And in that flow, I found glimpses of peace, quiet moments where the mind, once so noisy, became still. After understanding the importance of letting go, I realized that knowing alone wouldn't bring peace. I needed to practice, to turn these ideas into lived experience. The monk had offered me a glimpse of stillness, and the Buddha's teaching had opened a path, but walking it required action simple, patient steps every day. I began with what felt like the easiest yet hardest thing: sitting quietly. Not to force my mind to be silent, because that was impossible, but to observe it without judgment. The monk had said, "Sit, watch, do not react." I took that as my starting point. At first, sitting still felt uncomfortable. My body fidgeted. Thoughts buzzed endlessly. The urge to check my phone, plan my day, or fix some problem was almost unbearable. But I kept returning to my breath. In, out, simple and steady. I attained to notice how the breath moved in and out of my body, the cool air entering my nose, the warmth leaving it. This simple anchor became a refuge from the storm inside. Whenever my mind raced, I gently brought it back to the breath, without scolding myself for getting distracted. One day, I read about a meditation technique called mindfulness of breath. The instruction was straightforward. Focus your full attention on your breathing. When thoughts come, acknowledge them gently, then return to your breath. I tried it, and it was harder than I thought. My mind didn't want to cooperate. But with each attempt, I found a little more calm, like waves on the ocean. Some days were stormy, others calm, but the ocean beneath remained. The monk had also taught me about loving kindness, meditation, or metta. This was new to me. Instead of focusing only on calming the mind, this practice invited me to cultivate compassion for myself and others. I would sit quietly, close my eyes, and silently repeat phrases like, "May I be happy. May I be safe. May I be free from suffering." At first, the words felt strange, almost awkward. But slowly, I felt a warmth grow inside, a gentle softening of the tight grip I held on my fears. After that, I extended those wishes to others, family, friends, even people I struggled with. May you be happy. May you be safe. I realized that compassion wasn't just a feeling, but a powerful balm that healed the wounds of isolation and fear. As days turned into weeks, I started to notice subtle shifts. I was less reactive. When frustration bubbled up, I remembered to breathe and soften. When sadness came, I welcomed it instead of pushing it away. The mind didn't suddenly become quiet all the time, but it became less chaotic. Another practical lesson came unexpectedly during a walk through a quiet forest near the village. I was lost in thought, worried about things beyond my control, when I caught sight of a small stream. It was flowing steadily, calmly, even though rocks blocked parts of its path. I sat down by the water and watched how it moved, sometimes fast, sometimes slow, always adjusting. The stream didn't resist the obstacles. It found new ways around them. The lesson was clear. Life flows, and so should we. I began to practice this flexibility, not clinging rigidly to plans or expectations, but adapting and accepting change. The monk had also given me a simple technique for moments of acute anxiety. When panic or racing thoughts threatened to overwhelm me, he told me to focus on grounding. Find 5 things you can see, 4 you can touch, 3 you can hear, 2 you can smell, 1 you can taste, he instructed. I tried it during a particularly difficult evening when my chest tightened and my mind spun wild. Slowly, counting and naming these things brought me back to the present moment. It was like stepping out of a whirlwind into a calm clearing. I practiced mindful walking, too. Rather than rushing through my daily steps, I focused on each movement, how my feet touched the ground, the feeling of air on my skin, the rhythm of my breath. This simple attention turned mundane moments into meditation. Meditation wasn't just something I did sitting cross-legged on a cushion. It became a way of living, a way of being present with whatever arose. I also learned to be patient with myself. Progress wasn't linear. Some days were breakthroughs, others were setbacks. That was okay. The journey wasn't about perfection, but presence. Technology posed challenges. Notifications and endless distractions pulled me away. But I began setting small boundaries, turning off my phone during meditation, limiting social media, and creating quiet spaces in my day. At times, I journaled my experiences, writing down how I felt before and after meditation. This helped me see growth over time and identify patterns of thought that kept me stuck. One night, after weeks of consistent practice, I sat quietly before sleep and felt something I hadn't felt in years. A deep, abiding peace. Not the absence of thoughts, but a presence that welcomed them without fear. It was like coming home to myself. I realized that these teachings and techniques weren't magic pills. They were invitations to slow down, to notice, to be gentle, to love. The Buddha's wisdom came alive through practice. The monkey mind might still jump and chatter, but I wasn't its prisoner anymore. I was its witness, and in that witnessing, the chaos lost its power. The journey to stillness was never about perfection or arriving at a distant destination. It was about discovering something that had been inside me all along a quiet place, untouched by the noise and chaos of the mind. That stillness wasn't something I had to chase. It was something I could return to again and again, like coming home after a long day. As I reflect on this path, I realize how much my relationship with myself has changed. I used to believe that peace was the absence of struggle, the silence after the storm. But now I understand it is not the absence of the storm, it is the calmness at the center of the storm. The eye where the world slows down and the mind softens. Sometimes, even now, the storm returns. Thoughts rise like fierce winds, doubts howl like thunder, and fears flash like lightning. But I have learned not to be swept away. I remind myself, these are just passing clouds in an endless sky. They do not define me. The stillness within is like a vast ocean beneath turbulent waves. The waves come and go, but the ocean remains. It holds everything, joy and sorrow, peace and pain, and beneath it all, a steady depth that never changes. I want to share what I've learned because I know how many others carry their own storms inside. How many of us struggle with endless chatter, anxiety, and the weight of expectation. The path I walked was not easy, but it was worth every step. The Buddhist teachings that guided me are simple, yet profound. They remind us to let go, not by pushing or denying, but by embracing what is with gentle awareness. To practice kindness, especially toward ourselves when the mind becomes harsh and critical. To be present with whatever arises without running or resisting. Stillness is not about shutting down or escaping. It is about opening up to life, to ourselves, and to the world as it is. It is a surrender, not a defeat. Trust that beneath all the noise, there is a silence waiting to be heard. I encourage you to find that stillness within, not by forcing it, but by creating space for it. By sitting quietly, breathing deeply, and observing your mind with compassion. By letting go of the need to control and simply being. You might find it in the breath, in a quiet moment of nature, or in the simple act of pausing amid a busy day. It might come unexpectedly, like a gentle wave washing over you, reminding you that peace is always present, waiting patiently beneath the surface. Remember, you are not your thoughts. You are not your fears or your anxieties. You are the awareness behind them, the silent watcher who can choose not to be pulled into the chaos. This journey is ongoing. There will be days of struggle and days of grace. But each moment you choose stillness, you plant a seed of peace that grows stronger with time. The storm inside may never fully disappear, but it will no longer have the power to define your life. because now you carry a refuge within you, a sanctuary of calm that no external circumstance can shake as you move forward. Hold this truth close. The mind's restlessness is natural, but it is not all there is. There is a stillness beyond thought, a quiet that invites you to rest and be whole. May you find that stillness. May it bring you healing, clarity, and freedom. And may you walk your path with gentle courage, knowing that peace is not something to be found far away, is always within you, waiting to be uncovered. Thank you for sharing this journey with me. Wherever you are, whatever your storm, remember you are never alone. The stillness within is with you, always.